If you are over 60 and you have never smoked a single cigarette in your life, you may still be doing something every single day that is shortening your life just as fast, and possibly faster, than a pack-a-day habit. That is not a scare tactic. That is what the science now shows. And the most alarming part is not that these habits exist. The most alarming part is that most doctors never bring them up. Most families never notice them. And most people doing them believe they are perfectly fine. There are 5 daily habits that researchers have now linked to the same category of biological damage as chronic smoking. They accelerate inflammation. They destroy muscle. They starve the brain of oxygen. They collapse the immune system. And they do all of this so quietly, so gradually, that by the time most people feel the effects, years of damage have already been done. In this video, we are going to walk through all 5 of them together. We are going to look at exactly what each habit does inside your body, why it is so dangerous specifically after 60, and what you can start doing differently, starting today. Some of what you are about to hear will surprise you. One of them may describe your entire afternoon. Another may describe something you have been told is actually good for you. So stay with us until the very end, because the 5th habit is the one that almost nobody talks about, and it may be the most dangerous of all. Now, before we begin, I want to tell you about 2 men. Both of them are 68 years old. Both of them retired around the same time. Both of them would tell you, if you asked, that they are living a pretty normal life. Neither of them smokes. And neither of them drinks heavily. Their doctors have not flagged anything alarming, at least not yet. The first man is named Harold. Harold wakes up every morning around 7, makes himself a cup of coffee, and settles into his recliner to watch the morning news. He stays there for most of the morning. Around noon, he moves to the kitchen table for lunch, then back to the recliner for the afternoon. He is not lazy, that is not the right word. He is comfortable. He worked hard for 40 years, and he believes he has earned the right to rest. His wife sometimes asks if he wants to go for a walk. He usually says maybe later. Later rarely comes. The second man is named Raymond. Raymond also wakes up around 7. He also has coffee, but then he moves. Not dramatically. He is not running marathons. He takes a short walk around the neighborhood, maybe 20 minutes. He does a few things around the house. He meets a friend for lunch twice a week. He is not doing anything extraordinary. He is just not sitting still. 5 years from now, Harold and Raymond will look dramatically different. Not just physically, but in every measurable way that matters. Their cognitive scores, their blood pressure, their muscle mass, their fall risk, their independence. The gap between these 2 men will be so wide that it will be hard to believe they started from the same place. What is creating that gap is not genetics. It is not luck. It is 5 specific daily habits. Things Harold does every day that Raymond has learned to avoid. And by the time this video is over, you will know exactly what those habits are, what they are doing inside your body, and how to stop them from writing the wrong ending to your story. Let us begin. Habit 1. Sitting for more than 8 hours a day. Researchers at the University of California analyzed data from more than 8,000 adults over the age of 45, tracking their daily movement patterns and their health outcomes over a period of 4 years. What they found was stark. Adults who sat for more than 8 hours a day, with no significant physical activity, had a risk of dying during that period that was comparable to the risks associated with obesity and smoking. Not slightly elevated, comparable. 8 hours sounds like a lot. But think about your actual day. You wake up and have breakfast. That is sitting. You watch the morning news. That is sitting. You read. You browse on your tablet. You take a phone call. Sitting, sitting, sitting. By noon, many people over 60 have already spent 6 or 7 hours in a chair, a recliner, or a couch. They do not feel it. That is the trap. Here is what is really happening inside the body when you sit for long, uninterrupted stretches. Think of your circulatory system as a river. When the river is flowing, it carries oxygen and nutrients to every part of the body. The muscles, the brain, the organs. When the river slows down, sediment builds up. The water becomes murky. Things start to stagnate. When you sit for hours without moving, your circulation does exactly that. Blood pools in the lower extremities. Oxygen delivery to the brain slows. The muscles in your legs begin to weaken, not because you are aging, but because they are receiving the signal that they are not needed. But here is what makes this habit uniquely dangerous after 60. After the age of 60, the body loses muscle at a rate of 1 to 2% per year, a condition scientists call sarcopenia. Exercise can slow this process dramatically. But prolonged sitting does something even more insidious. It actually accelerates it. Every hour of continuous sitting triggers a measurable decrease in muscle protein synthesis. Your body, sensing that the muscles are not being used, begins to cannibalize them for other purposes. You do not feel this happening. But Harold's legs, after a year of long mornings in the recliner, are measurably weaker than they were. He notices it when he gets up from a chair and needs to push himself up with both hands. He tells himself it is just age. It is not just age. There is also the issue of what prolonged sitting does to the brain. A study published in PLOS One found that sedentary behavior is associated with thinning of the medial temporal lobe, the part of the brain responsible for memory formation. The people in this study who sat the most showed greater thinning in this region, even when they exercised at other points in the day. In other words, exercise at the gym in the morning does not fully undo what 6 hours of sitting does to your brain in the afternoon. And then there is inflammation. When you sit for hours without movement, the body begins producing higher levels of inflammatory cytokines, chemical messengers that signal the immune system that something is wrong. In the short term, this inflammation is a normal protective response. But when it becomes chronic, when it happens every day, all day, it becomes a destructive force. Chronic low-grade inflammation has now been linked to Alzheimer's disease, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and several forms of cancer. This is the same biological pathway that smoking triggers. It is just triggered differently. Now think about Margaret. Margaret is 72, a retired school teacher from Ohio. She would tell you proudly that she goes to the gym 3 mornings a week. She does her 30 minutes on the elliptical and feels good about it. But what Margaret does not realize is that she spends the remaining 21 or so waking hours mostly seated. She reads. She watches her stories. She knits. She loves all of these things. But her 3 weekly gym sessions, as valuable as they are, cannot overcome the cellular damage that 10 hours of daily sitting is quietly accumulating. Her daughter, Linda, noticed first. She came to visit over Thanksgiving and watched her mother struggle to get up from the low couch in the living room. Margaret laughed it off, said she just needed a higher couch. Linda was not laughing, because the Margaret who had walked her to school every morning for 12 years, the Margaret who had stood in front of a classroom for 35 years, that Margaret had never struggled to get up from anything. The fix is not dramatic. Research consistently shows that breaking up sitting time every 30 to 45 minutes, even with just 2 or 3 minutes of standing or slow walking, dramatically reduces these effects. You do not need to exercise more. You need to sit less consecutively. Set a quiet alarm on your phone. Stand up when you make a phone call. Walk to the kitchen for water. These micro breaks are not just helpful. They are, according to the current science, essential. Habit 2, sleeping less than 6 hours. Or more than 9. Sleep is the most underestimated health variable in the world. Not because people do not know it matters, but because most people believe they are getting enough of it when they are not. Or they believe more is always better when it is not. A landmark study from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine followed over 10,000 adults for a period of 10 years and found a U-shaped curve in the relationship between sleep duration and mortality risk. People who slept fewer than 6 hours per night had a significantly elevated mortality risk, but so did people who slept more than 9 hours per night. The sweet spot, the range associated with the lowest mortality risk in adults over 60, was between 7 and 8 hours. But it is not just duration. Quality matters just as profoundly. And this is where many older adults are being quietly devastated. Here's what sleep does that nothing else can replicate. During deep sleep, the slow-wave sleep stages, the brain activates a cellular cleaning system called the glymphatic system. Think of it as a pressure washer for the brain. It flushes out metabolic waste products that accumulate during the day, including a protein called amyloid beta, which is the same protein that accumulates in the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease. This cleaning process only happens during sleep. It cannot happen while you are watching television. It cannot happen during a nap if the nap is too short. It requires sustained, quality nighttime sleep. When sleep is shortened or fragmented, and for many people over 60, it is both, this cleaning process is interrupted. Amyloid beta accumulates. Over months and years, the brain changes. Memory becomes less reliable. Processing speed slows. The risk of dementia climbs. Now meet Thomas. Thomas is 74, a former accountant, sharp as a tack, or so his family believed. He has always been a light sleeper. Even in his working years, 5 or 6 hours was typical for him. He wore it as a badge of honor. Said he didn't need much sleep, never had. His wife, Gloria, would watch him fall asleep in his armchair at 8 in the evening, then wake up and insist he wasn't tired, then head to bed at 10 and lie awake until midnight. Over the last 2 years, Thomas has started repeating himself in conversation. Small things at first. A story told twice in the same evening. A name forgotten mid-sentence. Gloria noticed before Thomas did. She mentioned it to their son. Their son thought it was just normal aging. Nobody connected it to the 5 decades of 5-hour nights. Here's what Thomas's family did not know. A study from Washington University in St. Louis found that just one night of sleep deprivation caused a significant increase in amyloid beta levels in the human brain. One night. Now multiply that by 50 years of chronically short sleep. The accumulation is not hypothetical, it is measurable, it is real, and for Thomas, the window to reverse it may be getting narrow. If you are over 60 and you are sleeping fewer than 6 hours regularly, or if you are waking multiple times throughout the night, or if you are sleeping but never feeling rested, your brain is not getting cleaned. And the longer this continues, the more of that metabolic debris accumulates in places where it will eventually cost you dearly. The other side of the curve matters too. Sleeping more than 9 hours regularly in older adults is associated with increased inflammation, greater cardiovascular risk, and paradoxically, worse cognitive outcomes. More is not better. Regulated, consistent, quality sleep in that 7 to 8 hour window is what the body and brain require. The fixes are not mysterious. Consistent sleep and wake times, even on weekends, in keeping the bedroom cool and dark. Avoiding screens for at least an hour before bed. Cutting off caffeine by early afternoon. And critically, speaking to a doctor about sleep apnea, a condition that affects a significant percentage of older adults and destroys sleep quality silently, leaving people who believe they are sleeping 8 hours feeling as though they slept 4. Habit 3. Social isolation. The silent epidemic. There is a study that many researchers consider one of the most important findings in public health of the last 30 years. It came from Brigham Young University, and it analyzed data from over 300,000 people across multiple countries and multiple decades. The conclusion was simple and devastating. Social isolation increases the risk of early death by 26%. Loneliness, the subjective feeling of being socially disconnected, increases it by 29%. And living alone, when combined with loneliness, increases it by 32%. These numbers are comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Let that land for a moment. Not having meaningful human connection is, by the numbers, as dangerous as being a heavy smoker. And yet we rarely talk about it that way. When someone quits smoking, we celebrate them. We give them resources. We check in on them. When someone's social circle quietly contracts after retirement, after the children move away, after a spouse passes, after mobility becomes limited, we call it normal. We say they prefer their privacy. We stop dropping by as often. We tell ourselves they seem fine. Here is what happens inside the body when chronic loneliness sets in. The brain interprets social isolation as a threat, and not a metaphorical one. From an evolutionary standpoint, being cut off from the group was genuinely life-threatening for our ancestors. So the brain's threat detection systems activate. Cortisol levels rise. Inflammatory markers increase. The immune system shifts from a state of building long-term resilience to a state of short-term emergency response. Over months and years, this keeps the body in a low-level state of biological crisis. Inflammation running quietly in the background, eroding the cardiovascular system, the immune system, and the brain. A study from Harvard Medical School found that socially isolated older adults showed accelerated cellular aging, specifically shorter telomeres, which are the protective caps on chromosomes that determine how quickly cells age and die. Loneliness was literally aging them at the cellular level. Now meet Dorothy. Dorothy is 77, a widow who lives alone in the house where she raised her 4 children. She is quiet by nature, always has been. After her husband passed 3 years ago, her world got smaller. Her children call regularly. They are good children. But they are busy. They visit on holidays. Dorothy goes to church on Sundays. She does her grocery shopping on Tuesday mornings. Other than that, she mostly stays home. She tells herself she is content. She tells her daughter she is fine. And she genuinely believes both of these things. But Dorothy has started sleeping more. Her appetite has diminished. She finds less pleasure in things that used to delight her. Her garden, her mystery novels, her weekly phone call with her sister in Phoenix. She mentioned to her doctor at her last checkup that she has been feeling a bit low. Her doctor increased her vitamin D prescription. He did not ask about her social life. He did not have time to. And Dorothy did not think to bring it up, because she does not think of loneliness as a medical issue. She thinks of it as just how life is now. But Dorothy's biology tells a different story. Her inflammatory markers, if measured, would be elevated. Her cortisol patterns have shifted. Her immune system, already under the pressure of normal aging, is further compromised by the chronic low-level stress of social disconnection. She's not depressed in the clinical sense. She is isolated. And isolation, and for a 77-year-old woman whose social world has contracted to a church service and a Tuesday grocery run, is as real a health threat as anything her doctor might find in a blood test. The research is clear on what reverses this. It is not grand gestures. It is frequency and meaning. Older adults who have regular, meaningful contact with other people, even just a few interactions per week, show dramatically better health outcomes than those who do not. A phone call is not enough. In-person contact, even brief, activates biological systems that remote communication cannot. Shared meals, community groups, volunteering, a regular commitment to show up somewhere and be known by someone. If you have someone in your life who has been pulling back from the world, or if you are that person, please understand that this is not a personality preference to be respected from a distance. It is a health crisis to be gently, lovingly interrupted. Habit 4. Eating the same few foods. Every day. This one surprises people. It sounds almost harmless, maybe even virtuous. You found what works for you. You stick to it. You are consistent. But the science of the gut microbiome has fundamentally changed how researchers understand the relationship between diet diversity and aging, and what they have found is striking. The human gut contains somewhere between 30 and 40 trillion microorganisms. Bacteria, fungi, viruses, and other microbes that form an ecosystem more complex than anything we fully understand. This ecosystem is called the gut microbiome, and its health is now understood to influence everything from immune function, to inflammation, to cognitive performance, to cardiovascular health, to emotional regulation. It is not an exaggeration to say that the health of your gut microbiome is one of the most important determinants of how well you age. And what feeds this ecosystem? Variety. The microbiome thrives on dietary diversity. Each species of gut bacteria has different nutritional preferences. When you eat a wide variety of plant foods, different vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, nuts, and seeds, you are feeding a broad and diverse community of microorganisms that keep each other in balance and keep your body protected. When you eat the same narrow range of foods day after day, large sections of that community begin to shrink and disappear. And what fills the vacuum? Often, the less beneficial microbes, the ones associated with inflammation, with insulin resistance, with compromised immunity. A major study published in the journal Cell found that adults with lower gut microbiome diversity had significantly higher levels of inflammatory markers, worse metabolic health, and faster cognitive decline than those with higher diversity. Even when controlling for factors like exercise, smoking, and BMI. The diversity of what you eat is a direct predictor of how you age. Now meet Frances. Frances is 71, a retired nurse, and she will tell you that she eats healthy. She is not wrong exactly. Every morning she has oatmeal with blueberries. Every lunch is a ham sandwich on whole wheat with a side salad of iceberg lettuce and cucumber. Every dinner rotates between 4 or 5 meals she has been making for 30 years. A roast chicken, a pasta dish, some fish on Fridays. She takes her vitamins. She avoids sweets. But Frances's gut microbiome, without her knowing it, has been quietly narrowing for years. Her oatmeal and blueberries are feeding some of the community, but vast sections of her gut ecosystem have not received meaningful nutrition in months, perhaps years. The bacteria that feed on diverse plant fibers, the ones that produce short-chain fatty acids that protect the gut lining, reduce inflammation, and support brain health, are diminishing. Frances would not know this from how she feels day to day, but her body would reveal it in other ways. a slightly slower recovery from a recent cold, a low-grade joint stiffness she attributes to arthritis, a mental fogginess in the afternoons that she blames on getting older. Her daughter, who studied nutrition, tried once to convince her to add more variety to her meals. Frances said she was too old to learn new recipes. Her daughter quietly added some walnuts to the salad when she visited and suggested they try a new restaurant together, Bets, a place that served Mediterranean food. Frances enjoyed it more than she expected. She ordered lamb for the first time in 20 years. That small, enjoyable expansion of dietary variety, if sustained, would begin to shift Frances's gut microbiome within weeks. Research from the American Gut Project found that eating 30 or more different plant foods per week was the strongest predictor of gut microbiome diversity. 30 sounds like a lot, but a single meal at a good restaurant can contain 8 or 10 plant foods. The goal is not perfection. The goal is variety, pursued consistently and ideally with pleasure. After 60, the gut microbiome becomes less resilient and harder to restore once damaged. This makes dietary variety not a nice-to-have but a critical component of healthy aging. One that most people over 60 are failing to achieve, not because they are unhealthy eaters, but because they are creatures of comfortable habit in a body that desperately needs novelty. Before we get to the fifth habit, and I promise you it is the one that will stay with you the longest, I want to pause here for a moment. If you have been watching this far, you already care more about your health than most people do. That matters. The fact that you are here, taking this seriously, learning these things, that is not nothing. That is the beginning of every meaningful change. So if this video has been valuable to you, I want to ask you to do 2 things right now. First, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video like this one. We publish content like this regularly because we believe you deserve to have this information. Information that your doctor may not have time to give you, that your family may not know to share, that the medical establishment has been slow to translate into plain language for the people who need it most. Second, take a moment to leave a comment below. Tell us which of these habits surprised you the most, or share this video with someone you love who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the most important thing we can do for the people we care about is make sure they have the right information before it is too late. Now let us talk about habit 5. Because this one is different. This one does not involve what you eat, or how much you sleep, or how often you move. This one lives entirely in your mind, and it may be doing more damage than all the others combined. Habit 5. Chronic negative rumination. The habit nobody names. There's a word that researchers use for a very specific and very common mental habit: rumination. It means the repetitive, circular replaying of negative thoughts, worries, regrets, grievances, and fears. Not the occasional difficult thought. Everyone has those. Not grief, which is a necessary and healthy process, but the habitual returning to the same dark mental territory over and over, day after day, in a loop that never resolves. Most people who do this do not know they are doing it. They think of themselves as realists, as people who think things through, as people who have been through a lot and are simply living with the weight of it. They do not call it rumination. They call it remembering. They call it worrying about the grandchildren. They call it lying awake thinking. They call it just the way my mind works. But the science has given this habit a very precise biological profile, and what it shows is alarming. A study published in Nature Human Behavior found that people who engaged in high levels of repetitive, negative thinking showed accelerated amyloid accumulation in the brain, the same toxic protein buildup associated with Alzheimer's disease. The researchers followed participants over a 2-year period and found that the chronic negative thinkers had significantly greater deposits of amyloid and tau, 2 of the primary biological markers of Alzheimer's, than those who did not engage in repetitive negative thought. This was independent of depression, independent of anxiety. The rumination itself was the risk factor. A separate body of research has established that chronic rumination keeps the body's stress response in a state of perpetual low-level activation. Cortisol stays elevated. The sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight system, never fully powers down. And the consequences of this, accumulated over years and decades, are nearly identical to what we see in chronic stress: elevated inflammation, suppressed immune function, disrupted sleep, increased cardiovascular risk, and accelerated brain aging. In other words, the thoughts you think every day are doing something to your body. Not metaphorically, biologically, measurably. Now meet Eleanor. Eleanor is 80 years old, and she is one of the sharpest, most warm-hearted people you would ever meet. She raised 3 children, ran a household through difficult years, and kept her family together through things that would have broken lesser people. She is not weak. She has never been weak. But Eleanor has a habit she has had since childhood. A habit of turning things over in her mind long after the moment has passed. She replays conversations she had with her late husband during their difficult years of marriage. Things she wishes she had said differently. Things she cannot take back. She worries about her son in California, who she does not see enough. She lies awake at night going over her finances, calculating and recalculating whether her savings will last, arriving at the same conclusion she always arrives at. Probably fine, but never settling there. In the morning, she wakes with a low heaviness that she has always attributed to just how she is wired. Eleanor's daughter Susan once asked her gently, "Mom, what's going on in your head when you go quiet like that?" Eleanor thought about it. She said, "Oh, I'm just thinking," Susan asked. "Thinking about what?" And Eleanor paused for a long moment and then said, "I don't even know anymore. It's just everything. All at once. Always." That is rumination. Not a personality trait. Not a sign of intelligence or depth or sensitivity, though it often travels with those things. It is a habit. And like all habits, it can be interrupted. Research from the University of Oxford has found that behavioral activation, deliberately engaging in absorbing, enjoyable activities that demand attention, is one of the most effective interruptions of ruminative thought. Not meditation necessarily, though that can help. Not talking about the rumination, though that can also have value. But doing something that fully occupies the mind, learning something new, working with the hands, playing music, gardening, solving puzzles, reading something engrossing, being with people who draw you out of your head. The brain cannot fully ruminate and fully attend to an absorbing task at the same time. When you consistently choose engagement over inward cycling, you're not just improving your mood. You are, according to the current evidence, slowing the accumulation of toxic proteins in your brain. You are reducing your cortisol. You are giving your immune system a chance to operate properly. You are buying time. Eleanor, at the urging of her daughter, joined a watercolor class at the local community center. She was terrible at it in the beginning and found this funny rather than discouraging. She went every Thursday. She made a friend named Vivian, who was 76 and also terrible, and they laughed about it together over coffee afterward. Eleanor's daughter noticed the change within a month. Eleanor went quiet less often. When she did, she came back faster. She started talking about Vivian's new granddaughter, about the painting she was trying to finish, about a documentary she and Vivian had watched. She was still Eleanor, still complex, still reflective, but the loop had been interrupted, and her body, though she would never have described it this way, had been given a reprieve, bringing it all together. We began this video with Harold and Raymond, 2 men, 68 years old, both retired, both healthy by conventional measures. And we said that 5 years from now, they would look dramatically different. Now you know why. Harold sits too long. And Harold's sleep has been fragmented for years by undiagnosed sleep apnea that his wife mentions at every dinner and that Harold has never addressed. Harold has been eating the same 5 dinners since 1987. Harold's social world has been slowly shrinking since retirement, and he does not think of this as a problem because he has always been a bit of a homebody. And Harold lies awake at night replaying an argument with his brother that happened 11 years ago, wondering what he could have said, never arriving at peace. Every one of these habits is quietly working on his biology. Each one, individually, would represent a meaningful risk. Together they are compounding, creating a biological environment that is accelerating Harold's aging, increasing his inflammation, depleting his muscle, slowing his brain, and shortening his independent years. Not because Harold is a bad person or a foolish person, because nobody ever told him, because these things look, from the outside, like a comfortable retirement. Raymond across town has stumbled into different habits almost by accident. He gets up and moves not because he knows the science, but because he gets restless. He sleeps well because his wife insisted they see a sleep specialist 2 years ago, and Raymond is now being treated for mild apnea. He eats adventurously because his daughter is a good cook, and he goes to her house for dinner twice a week, and she always makes something he has never tried. He stays connected because his friend group from his working years has a standing breakfast every other Saturday, and he values it too much to let it slip. And Raymond's mind, though he would not call himself an optimist, tends toward the next thing rather than the last thing. Raymond has not won the genetic lottery. He has not done anything heroic. He has simply, without fully realizing it, built a daily life that is aligned with what his biology needs in this stage of life. Here's the truth that matters most. You are not Harold or Raymond permanently. You are not locked into any of these habits. The research on neuroplasticity, on the brain's capacity to change in response to new behaviors, is unambiguous. It applies to people in their 60s, their 70s, their 80s. The body responds to intervention at any age, not always as quickly as it once did, not always as completely, but it responds. Sit less. Not enormously less, just break it up. Sleep better, not perfectly, just more consistently, and get the apnea checked. Connect with people, not with everyone, just with someone regularly, meaningfully. Eat more variety. Not a complete overhaul, just one new thing per week, consistently expanded. And interrupt the loop, not by eliminating thought, but by choosing, deliberately, to put your attention somewhere that demands it and rewards it. These are not dramatic interventions. They do not require a gym membership or a perfect diet or a personality transplant. They require only the understanding that what you do every day is writing your future. The belief that your future is still worth writing well. You have earned more than a recliner and a quiet house and a shrinking world. You have earned the sharp mind and the strong body and the full life that these small, consistent choices make possible. Do not let habits, quiet, invisible, comfortable habits, take that from you. Thank you for spending this time with us today. Leave a comment below and tell us which of these 5 habits you are committing to change. Even one small step. Your words might be exactly what someone else in this community needs to hear. And if this video helped you, please share it with someone you love. Because the most powerful thing we can do for the people who matter to us is make sure they have what they need to stay well, stay strong, and stay here for as long as possible.